Hi, I'm going to talk about the 12 key components of IDEA, which stands for Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. The 12 key components are so important for a child's education, especially if they have a disability. And this is great actually for parents and students who are not educated or don't have an idea or the knowledge what they need to have regarding IEPs or the IDEA. So the first thing I wrote, the FAPE, there's so many acronyms in education. Even as an educator for 10 plus years, I still have to refer back to my notes because there's so many acronyms. The FAPE is the Free Appropriate Public Education. I drew some dollar signs and I wrote free education. I wrote with a little microphone because children are able to go to public education for free at the public expense because that's the law. So number 2, LRE, least restrictive environment. I drew a little child that has a physical disability next to a child sitting at a desk with no disability. I drew that to remind parents and students that this means a child with any kind of learning disability or physical disability has access to an accessible classroom at the most potential that he or she possibly can, with the least amount of restrictions as possible among their peers. Number 3 is the IEP itself, Individualized Education Program. This is super important. I drew a piece of paper with a list of accommodations such as extra time, visuals, or copy of notes, just a few that I had off the top of my head, just as a visual to remind parents that the IEP actually addresses the accommodations for a child to be successful in a classroom. I also drew a table because the committee, the parent, and the general education teacher need to come together to create this plan to meet the needs of that student. I have the referral process. This is super important. This is what a lot of parents don't know, is that parent referrals can happen, and it can happen at any time of the year. They can go through the educational website for their district and refer a student for IEP process to be evaluated, which is actually the next step as well. But the teacher or a parent can refer a student, and it can be for behavior or academic purposes. Number 5, the evaluation process. Is there a disability with a question mark? Yes or no? And then you have to prove it. You can't just say, oh, I think this child is struggling, I think they need an IEP. You have to have measurable data, which is why I have a ruler right here for this parents to be reminded of that. Parent and student involvement. I drew a key because this is the absolute, if I could put a stamp on it, circle it, highlight it, whatever I need to do. This is key to a child's success in the classroom if they have an IEP or getting an IEP. I put stop, collaborate, and listen. That's because a parent and a student involvement, we have to be able to collaborate with each other, discuss with each other, come up with a plan together that fits the needs of that student. Number 7, I wrote progress monitoring. This is super important because if you set goals during your IEP, you need to be able to see if they're being met, and with that, the measurable data as well. You're going to need to do progress monitoring, which an educator should be doing for all their students, whether they're in with an IEP or not, or in 504, whatever. It's any child in the classroom. You should be doing progress monitoring to make sure that they are on track and what they are supposed to be doing. Number 8, over here, the annual review. Does it meet? You're going to meet once a year. If a child does have an IEP, you meet one time a year, and that's it. You meet with the counselor and the IEP team, administration team, parent, and the educational teacher, the general education teacher, to make sure that the needs are being met for that actual student, the accommodations, or whatever it is. That actually brings me to quarterly progress monitoring. I put a quarter here to let them know these are monitoring. This is when we monitor as educators for beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year. Okay. I also put the procedural safeguards. These are to protect the rights of parents and children through this whole entire process, the laws and the regulations here. And this actually has to be given to a parent prior to a child receiving an IEP. A copy of these safeguards have to be presented. Number 10, prior notice provides parent written notice of changes or refusals regarding education. The prior notice, you have to get parent consent. No matter what, you have to send home written consent, get their consent signed on paper before you can do any kind of evaluation for that student. Over here, I put services, which is the actual transfer. Do they need additional services for their IEP? Do they need transportation services? Do they need speech therapy? And those are actually just additional services that you can tack onto the IEP here. And then number 12, I put the procedural safeguards. This is actually something that has to be presented to a parent as well. A copy of it needs to be presented to a parent of a child with the disabilities, and it's one time a year as well, and it has to have parental consent as well as teacher consent. And that is it. The IEP is absolutely important to any student. If you're an educator, you have to be able to know the rules, the laws, the regulations, and the process of getting an IEP started, because you have to have measurable data more than anything. You have to be documenting everything about that student and making sure that the progress is being met, and if it's not, what are the steps that we need to take to get that student where they need to be. And that's the whole point of an IEP.